setup update for you. That will be at the end of the video. For now, I want to talk about Jack Sullivan, or more pertinently, about an interview that Jack Sullivan did with Dodge Woodall. And for those of you that don't know, Dodge Woodall is West Ham fan. Really, really great podcast. If you've not seen it, I think it's Eventful Lives. That's what it's called. But I mean, it could be called Extraordinary Lives. It's amazing. It's not really a West Ham-based podcast. Far from it, actually. So if you want to fancy a good listen, something away from West Ham, done by a West Ham fan, it really is very, very good stuff. But in this episode, he interviewed Jack Sullivan. Sat down for 80 minutes, I think. Had a chat with Jack. Really good. Now, look, as a West Ham fan, you're going to know a lot of this stuff, but he did give some really interesting insights into some of the workings behind the club. And that me being me, I've sort of picked the bones out of it. And there was one bit that really stood out for me. And it was when Dodge asked Jack the question of who decided to bring Tim Steidten in. Fascinating. Really, really fascinating. And fair play to Jack for answering the question as candidly as he did. I think at West Ham we've been guilty. I was going to say guilty. I think we're within our rights to question this stuff, by the way. But guilty of wondering who picked who signed who signed Saeed Benrahma. Was it a David Moyes signing? Was it a Jack Sullivan? Sorry, was it a David Sullivan signing? And this continues very, very recently. Who'd signed Luis Guilherme? Who signed? You get the idea. We've done it for quite some time, and I think it reflects on the uncertainty that there is within the club that we would continue to do so. I bet they don't do that at other clubs. I'm sure you could find me an example, but by and large, you went through the other 19 Premier League clubs. I wouldn't mind betting that most of their fans don't say, oh, who signed this one? But anyway, I think to a certain extent we felt we'd put it to bed, but now I'm not so sure. Maybe it says more about me than anything else. I've been looking at it thinking, was that Lopetegui signing, or did Sullivan choose that one, or was that a Tim Steidten one? Now the club would have that everybody signs off on every signing, and that's probably right. I would imagine they all do sit down, and there is a committee, and that's absolutely fine. However, more recently there was a rumour that quite possibly Julian Lopetegui was not Tim Steidten's choice. Now, when I say a rumour, it wasn't rumour. It was rumour makes it suggested that it's sort of understated. No. This was like a bludgeoning suggestion that actually, because there was an article that went out last week, about over a week ago, which suggested that Tim Steidten wanted to separate himself from the signing of Julian Lopetegui. Basically, opinions attributed to Steidten were put out there, which suggested he wanted to keep Lopetegui at arm's length. He wanted to do nothing, had nothing to do with the recruitment of him. And it was very much David Sullivan's choice. Not only that, but Tim Steidten had warned David Sullivan, don't get this manager. Now, what the reason is, I'm not going to repeat everything that I said last week, but that brought in another story, which is rather than just being, oh, hold on, who signed this player or who signed that player? It was a case of, hold on, who signed the manager? So we were looking at something else entirely. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because, I mean, look, a lot of us had suspected that just you put 2 and 2 together, and you know what, you don't always get 5 and 6, do you? Sometimes you put 2 and 2 together and you get 4. And it certainly seemed that way. I think a lot of us thought that Ruben Amorim was Tim Steidten's choice, and then when they didn't get him, that it was that David Sullivan had said, you know what, let's get Lopetegui, because Lopetegui apparently interviewed well. Most of us believed that, so we weren't surprised when that other news came out, right? And then we've had an older story, which I think has gone to sleep for quite a while. A story which has, maybe in many respects, vanished into legend. So here's the old rumour. The old rumour is this. That towards the end of David Moyes' reign, and in particular, because of the signings of both Gianluca Scamacca and Maxwell Cornet, Daniel Kretinsky, the second highest shareholder at West Ham, became concerned with the wasteful nature of West Ham's transfer business. Let's put it that way. Well, actually, we mitigated our losses relatively well with Scamacca, to be absolutely fair. I think we bought him for about 35. We wouldn't have ever had to pay 35. He didn't stay long enough. I didn't achieve all the things to make it ratchet up to that, and we sold him for 25, and he went away, did well. So we lost only 10 million. Crikey, imagine if Kretinsky had been here with Sebastian Haller and Felipe Anderson. Anyway, don't worry about that. And I think he was worried that, well, £17 million for Maxwell Cornet, and he's looking at it thinking, well, hold on a second. This is £17 million spent on someone a manager's not really going to use. We're not going to see that money back. So anyway, they do that thing, that root and branch inquiry. So the rumour was that he wanted a more detailed financial and astute financial approach to buying and selling at West Ham. So it was the rumour that Kretinsky had said that he'd brought in, it was his decision to bring in Tim Steidten. As I say, it sort of disappeared into myth and legend, that old story, because quite frankly, we had bigger things to think about, other bigger, more important things to discuss. But I think with some of the comments that Jack has given in the podcast that he did with Dodge, has made that, has sort of reawakened that somewhat. I'll tell you what he said in just a second. Before I do, this video is sponsored by Match Bingo. Well, you can tell that because it's up on a graphic on the screen already. If you don't know what Match Bingo is, where you've been, if you do, you possibly played it already. If you played it already, you probably even won on it. Because Match Bingo is, well, it's just a way that you can basically win money with very, very small stake and small outlay. Now, it is gambling, but it's very small stake, £2 per game, and we've had a lot of winners here at Hammers Chat. Basically, it's like bingo, but rather than having a card with loads of numbers on it, you get a card that has incidents that happen in an event. So rather than a number 11 or a number 22 or other numbers, you might have a throw-in, you might have a goal kick, a card. Hopefully not a sending off. You never know, you might get lucky with Edson Alvarez. And what happens is each time one of those events happens, it gets ticked off on your card. If you get one line, there's basically 15 things that have got to happen on the card. Get one line, you get some money. Get two lines, you get some money. Get a full house. We've had people win 25 quid. We've had people win 50 quid. Bad people win 100 quid, 250 quid. We've even had a £500 winner over on Hammers Chat. The link is in the description below. Go and check it out. It's an extra way to give you a little bit of extra layer of interest on match day. Make sure you get your cards in for West Ham against Ipswich. Links in the description below. You can't spend loads of money on it. The maximum you can actually spend on a game is £10 anyway. But it's £2 per card. But if you did fancy going all in, then if you buy 3 cards, which is £6, you'll get another 2 for free. So you basically get 5 cards for the price of free. Links in the description below. Match Bingo. Give it a whirl. Lots of people have won on it so far. Right, so Dodge said to Jack, who decided to bring in Daniel Kretinsky? Who decided to bring in Tim Steidten? Jack said it was a board decision. Everybody decided. He said, but both Dad and then Daniel interviewed him. Now, I took from that, it doesn't really matter who interviewed who first. I don't think he really referenced that. But I got the impression that they interviewed him separately. Now, people might think, well, what are you talking about, mate? That's not really news. I didn't suggest it was news. I just thought it was quite interesting because we've heard for so long that Daniel Kretinsky has nothing to do with West Ham, that he's focused on whatever that big French company it was buying, that he's focused on buying out the Royal Mail or his other interests. He's not interested. He has nothing to do with West Ham. That David Sullivan solely deals with the day-to-day running of West Ham. That's what we're told. That's what we believe. It's clearly not the case. Because what it does, by knowing the information, actually, Daniel Kretinsky also interviewed the director of football. That suggests he's far more involved than we thought. It also might give some credit to the rumour that we initially heard, that actually it was Kretinsky pushing to bring a director of football in. And I have to say, when I first heard those rumours, whenever it was 18 months ago, they did seem believable. Because I'd not seen anything in the career of Sullivan, Gold, Brady to suggest that they had their finger on the pulse of what was going on in European coaching or anything like that. In fact, you've only got to look at the type of managers that they have recruited. And actually, it's not just about, they brought in Sam Allardyce, they brought in David Moyes and stuff like that. It's actually, they always had a policy of never bringing somebody in who hadn't had Premier League experience. Now, that's absolutely fine. They could do that. But what my only point is, it does suggest that quite possibly they wouldn't have known who the best up-and-coming European talent spotters were. So I always found it, and we discussed it, I remember discussing it with Gio on a video, we always found it quite interesting, and it was more believable that somebody outside of the club had recommended. I said, look, this is the best young up-and-coming identifier of talent in the game. He's done his apprenticeship at Bayer Leverkusen. All the stuff that you heard, you thought, that's not a David Sullivan, Karen Brady type thing, you know. So I found it believable. Now to hear that he actually interviewed him, he was part of the process, decision-making process, I think, okay, now this is interesting. But I'll tell you what's more interesting than that, is that if we now know he not only did he interview him, but he also helped select him, which leads us to believe that he was probably instrumental and crucial in identifying the need for a director of football. Because he was sick of this. He was sick of hemorrhaging money. He was sick of Skamaka or Nikola Vlasic or anyone else, sick of losing tens of millions of pounds each season. So you have to assume he's saying, we've got to do this differently. We can't carry on like this. And nor could we, not with financial fair play the way it is. Can't get your transfers wrong anymore. Certainly not to the extent that West Ham did. So if we know that that's the truth, then I would probably suggest that he is getting regular updates. And that's interesting because I absolutely, we know that Julian Lopetegui is reporting back to David Sullivan on a weekly basis, probably more than that. I'm absolutely certain that Tim Steidten reports back to David Sullivan all the time. But I've not really given any thought to the fact that Tim Steidten might be reporting back to Daniel Kretinsky. And I think he is. He probably clearly is, which means Daniel Kretinsky probably knows exactly what's going on all the time, everywhere. And rather than him just being this arm's length shareholder who doesn't get involved, well, he clearly does get involved. Heavily involved. So involved that he's willing to change the structure of the club. So involved that he's going to start getting involved in the interviewing process and whatnot. And I just think when you factor all that stuff in with all the other, let's say, less than flattering news that there's been about West Ham over the last month, I think it's interesting. I really, really do. And it would appear that we've... I do think David Sullivan would have far more to do with the day-to-day running of the club. I really do. You've only got to listen to the podcast to know that Sullivan still does. But I do think we have. There's somebody else there. There's somebody else who's going to make decisions, and I don't know about anyone else. I sort of take some comfort from that. Really, I think it's important. Somebody, particularly a businessman as successful as him, particularly if you can work alongside everybody that's there, I think that's important. But also, if things are starting to go a little bit loopy, if things are starting to get a little bit silly, then to actually have someone there who's going to be no nonsense and say, no, this is what I want to do. This is the direction the club should go in. I think new ideas is as important as... And Jack made that point himself in the podcast. I think he wasn't talking about West Ham. He was talking about business in general, bringing new people on new ideas. But there's no reason why that wouldn't help with West Ham. And I don't think it's any bad thing to have someone like Kretinsky in there. I'm happier that he's involved rather than just being a distant shareholder. It's an extra pair of eyes looking over West Ham. So, look, we all hope that Julian Lopetegui wins. I say we all hope. Most people hope Julian Lopetegui wins and we get our season back on track against Ipswich. But, yeah, it certainly made me think that maybe there is another set of eyes looking closely on everything and stuff that's happening. Right, I'm going to go now. Before I do, I said I'd give you a pup date. Here it is. So, I'm picking up the pup second week in November. Well, that's when he's 8 weeks old. You don't take a puppy away from its mum before 8 weeks, basically, and rightly so. And I think this is a really interesting one. So we're calling him Zippy. You'll know who he is straight away in this video. He's got a little. Here's a boy. He's got a little pink collar on, and he's starting to find his legs. They look like sea legs. He's a bit wobbly in this one, but he's starting to find his legs. As you will also see, he's also starting to find his voice.